During the first 6 weeks of hurricane season, the Atlantic has remained relatively quiet due to the emerging El Niño that's going on. With the exception of Tropical Storm Arthur in June, there really has not been that much activity going on across the basin. Although, if you looked over the last couple of days, that might start to change soon. I've been seeing a lot of ensemble models, I've been seeing a lot of Twitter posts, I've been seeing a lot of YouTubers talk about this, about some potential tropical development maybe going on in parts of the Gulf region. I've seen NASDA's Weather talk about it, I've seen David Schlotthauer talk about it, I've seen Weatherman Plus talk about it, I've even seen some meteorologists on Twitter talk about it as well. And they've been seeing a potential tropical system that is expected to detach off a cold front, emerge in the Gulf region, and potentially move into the southeastern United States and make landfall. Some of the ensembles have it as a tropical storm, some even stronger than that, others keeping it kind of all over the place. But how realistic is this? Is this just some more noise during an El Niño year, or is this an actually legitimate signal? And in today's video, we're going to talk about it and go over every single angle of this potential development. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive right into it. So, here's the situation that we got for today. We are looking at our potential area of development off the Gulf. We're going to be looking at the ensembles, we're going to be looking at the models, we're going to be looking at the conditions, and we're going to be dissecting what exactly is going on and are the conditions favorable. That's the main general gist of what we're doing. There's also a couple of other things that we're going to discuss towards the end of the video as well, so be sure you stay tuned for that. But with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into this. Starting off, we have our ensembles courtesy of the Weather Nerds website right here. We're going to go ahead and shift this over slightly, and we're going to go ahead and zoom in to the Gulf region right here. Here is our zoom in, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to go ahead and take this from the top and get started. So here's what we got. This is 5 days out, at least at the time of recording this video, for around the time of July 17th. This is when a lot of the ensembles start having this cold front moving out into parts of Florida, parts of the deep south, and starting to slowly detach with our little tropical system that might be developing. So we're going to go ahead and start here and start making our way forward. So let's go ahead and start 12 hours out. You're already starting to see, at least according to the European ensemble, a couple of model plots starting to pull up over here off the coast of Florida and in parts of the Gulf region right here, just north of the loop current, as a matter of fact. So that's definitely something that we're going to want to watch out for, especially as the system is expected to start slowly moving first southwest as the front is moving, and then start to detach, and then start to move further back up to the north, according to a lot of these models. And already you're seeing more ensembles picking up. You're seeing the ensembles already established, shifting further and further to the southwest in lieu of our frontal system over here. So definitely something to pay attention to. A couple more are starting to pop up by the time we get to July 18th over here. And then as time continues to go on, we're going to go ahead and go another 12 hours out. And this is when things really start to get interesting over here. As you start to look at it, you're seeing a lot more ensembles starting to pop up in the Gulf as the system is starting to detach from the frontal boundary and start to develop its own source of convection and start tapping into these warm waters to start slowly organizing and potentially developing according to these ensemble runs. As we start to look at it, we're also noticing a little bit of power associated with these ensembles too. 983, 1001, just to name a couple of them right here. As we go ahead and go 24 hours out, this is when things start to get interesting. The European actually has this continuing to move further and further over to the west, potentially impacting areas across much of the Gulf Coast, particularly in Louisiana, Mississippi, and potentially Alabama. Although there is this one ensemble over here that is moving closer towards Texas. This is more so an outlier, and if this were to happen, this would likely be a Hurricane Hannah 2020 scenario over here, but based on the other models I have seen, that is extremely unlikely. likely it's mainly going to stay further to the north and potentially move back to either Florida or other parts of the Gulf Coast, primarily due to the lack of steering currents. But overall, a pretty big shift. And also look at these power numbers as well. 999, 996, 964 is our outlier, but 1003, 1001, 1002. These are pretty powerful systems, especially for as you're moving closer and closer to the coast over here. And that's a big situation you're going to want to watch. And then going ahead and going out to 8 days out, you have this system making landfall, whether it's in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, or even the Florida Panhandle, according to the European ensembles. After that, we go another 24 hours out, it's moving inland, and it's not really doing too much afterward. It's mainly going to dissipate and kind of do that all over there. So that's the European ensemble. I want to also pull up a couple other ensembles as well, particularly the Google DeepMind and the Canadian as well, because they're showing a similar situation, and even the AI GFS is also showing a similar situation too. So we're going to pull those models up now. So here is our Google DeepMind for you guys right here. We're going to go ahead and go back to 120 hours out and watch this area right here, particularly in the eastern part of the Gulf. We're going to go ahead and skip forward 12 hours right here, ladies and gentlemen. You start seeing our first ensemble starting to pop up just around the loop current, as a matter of fact, as that frontal system starts to detach and you start having this tropical system starting to get its act together. And as we go ahead and go another 12 hours out, you're kind of seeing this one ensemble staying by itself for the first day or so. But then by the time we get to July 19th, you're seeing more of these ensembles starting to pop up across much of this region over here that you're going to want to pay attention to. 1001, 996, 1003, definitely some power associated with some of these ensembles that you're going to want to pay attention to. And then as we go ahead and go to 168 hours out, this is a week out, around the evening of the 19th, 1000, 1004, definitely more ensembles starting to show up here and there in particular. And as we go ahead and go to 180 hours out, while it remains relatively weak from what I've seen, it's definitely a situation where it looks to be a legitimate signal. And once the system does detach from this frontal boundary, according to some of these ensembles, it looks to me it's either going to stay kind of in the eastern Gulf, or it's going to slowly move up towards the Gulf Coast, whether it's in Florida or in other parts of the Gulf Coast like Louisiana, Mississippi, or Alabama. Those areas are a bit uncertain as of right now. But overall, as we go ahead and go to 8 days out right here, this is what we have. The majority of the ensembles on the Google DeepMind want this system to make landfall around tropical storm strength in the Big Bend region in Florida. If that were to happen, that would be definitely kind of interesting. You also have a couple of other ensembles heading towards the Louisiana coast or the Florida Panhandle as well. But overall, it's a pretty widespread from what I've seen, and we need to watch out with these trends with what's going to happen over the next couple of days, mainly because what we need to see is where is this going to zero in. And if you're seeing these models all over the place and you're still seeing this starting to pump up, there's a lot more uncertainty to work with. And it's definitely something that you would not want to watch. And what I mean by that is it's going to be a lot more difficult to forecast, because if you're having all the models and the ensembles all over the place, then you can't really find a concrete area as to where things are going. But if you start seeing that start to slowly zero in a particular location, that's when things start to get a little bit better, and that's what we're going to need to watch over the next couple of days. But another 24 hours out, you do have some of these ensembles shifting and moving into parts of the Carolinas and Georgia after the system makes landfall. Other ensembles mainly stay in the Gulf, potentially impacting the Florida Panhandle. All the way from Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle is in play, according to the Google DeepMind over here. And as we go ahead and go to 10 days out, definitely noticing some more power with the ensembles that do stay out in parts of the Gulf right here. Potentially a hurricane scenario on the higher end, according to the Google DeepMind. Am I saying that that's going to happen? Most likely not. We'll have to check the conditions to see how realistic that is, but my gut's telling me as of right now, most likely no. So we'll have to watch out and pay attention to it regardless. But that is your Google DeepMind for you guys right here. And let's go ahead and show the Canadian run as well. Going back to 5 days out for you guys right here, definitely an interesting situation as you start seeing these ensembles starting to pop up around July 18th over here. And then as time continues to go on, they remain relatively weak, but slowly get their act together as the system starts to detach from the frontal boundary, from the cold front, and then start to tap into those warm Gulf waters as it starts to head slowly towards the Gulf Coast, potentially towards Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama once again, although the spread on the Canadian is all over the place. It's completely up in the air right here. You have one ensemble heading towards Louisiana, another one heading towards the delta of the Mississippi River, you have another one heading towards the Alabama-Florida border, another one in the Florida Panhandle and the Big Bend. So you have a pretty big spread going on, at least according to the ensembles. You're also seeing that this isn't necessarily the biggest signal with this, according to the one I'm pulling up right here. If we show the 18Z real quickly, it's a lot more concentrated, I would say, in terms of the power and in terms of the ensembles that's starting to show. We've definitely seen over the last day or so, all these ensembles are really starting to pick up as time continues to go on. I'm not sure how that's going to hold. We'll have to wait and see as more data continues to come out. But my goodness, things definitely seem to be, at least for me, on a decent track with this. And it's not just the ensembles too, it's also the operational AI models that are picking up on this as well. And we'll go ahead and get started. Here is the European AI model that we have showed for you guys right here. This is going to be a bit interesting, to say the very least. Let's go ahead and pull this up. As time continues to go on, we start out at about 120 hours out. That's about 5 days out as we get towards around the 17th or 18th of July, as the system starts to emerge off the Florida Panhandle right here in the Florida Peninsula, starting to move into the Gulf region, detaching from that front and becoming its own source of convection right there, tapping into those Gulf waters. You have the system starting to slowly organize and develop according to the AMI model, and then becoming potentially tropical storm strength before moving back towards the Florida Panhandle. The AI run is actually going quite aggressive right here, potentially hurricane strength according to this run. I'm not 100% sure how realistic that is. We will talk about that in a few minutes. But overall, you have the system kind of just hovering and hugging the coast of the Gulf region right here, potentially impacting a lot of areas in Florida, southern Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and even the New Orleans area in Louisiana before making landfall around tropical storm strength. So that's definitely an interesting situation that you're going to want to pay attention to. By the time this all precipitates, it emerges off the Florida region over here, starting around the 17th or 18th of July, gets its act together by the time we get to around the 19th and the 20th, and then starts to head towards the Florida Panhandle, and then just hugs the coast from the 21st, the 22nd, and the 23rd, and the 24th. By the time it does make landfall, according to the European AI, this is about 11 days out, so obviously things are very subject to change, and unless we see a big collapse in the steering currents, I'm personally thinking this is going to head straight back either into the Florida Panhandle or the Big Bend region, unless something completely unexpected happens. But that's what we got going on with the AI for the European. Even the AI GFS is also picking up on this as well. Let's go ahead and show you that. The 0Z is actually now out, but I want to show the 18Z as well to kind of compare and contrast. Here is your 18Z GFS. You're having the system organizing and potentially developing, kind of hugging off the coast of Louisiana right here before making landfall as around tropical depression strength based on what I'm seeing from the 18Z. So a bit of a disagreement from what we've seen according to the European AI. But what's the 0Z showing? I'm a little curious right now. The 0Z is actually quite a bit more aggressive. In fact, this is a continued trend I have noticed with a lot of these models right here, where you're looking at a lot more of an aggressive situation. It actually has it making landfall in the Florida Panhandle near Port St. Joe, I believe that is, around 1,001 millibars. That is tropical storm strength right there. That's not a weak system that you're dealing with. It's actually rather organized and somewhat compact, albeit most of the convection does seem to be, at least the heaviest part of the convection seems to be on the eastward side, which will ultimately make flooding and potential storm surge in the Big Bend region a little bit more hectic over there. But by and large, the operational and the ensembles, at least the AI ones, are definitely in support of this. I've looked at the old guards. The European, the GFS regular aren't necessarily too on board with this just yet. Same thing with a few of the other models. But one thing I do need to emphasize is the AI models have definitely been pretty accurate, especially over the last couple of years. In 2025, it accurately predicted Aaron, it accurately predicted the infamous Invest 91L incident, accurately predicted Gabrielle, and it accurately predicted Melissa as well. Same thing with 2026, it's been accurate at predicting it was Tropical Storm Arthur as well. So it definitely has a good track record, and it's definitely something that you're going to want to add a little bit more weight with, given this track record as well. But I also want to go ahead and not just take these models at face value. What are the conditions like? What are things looking like on the surface? What are things going to be looking like in the upper atmosphere? And for that, let's go ahead and take a quick look. Starting off with our water temperatures. Water temperatures are very piping hot across much of the Gulf over here. Things are definitely getting more interesting as time continues to progress. You're looking at 30 plus degrees Celsius waters across much of the Gulf, and where this system is expected to emerge and detach from the frontal boundary, it is going to continue to persist, and it is going to continue to be in those 30 to 31 degrees Celsius waters. For those of you who do not know how warm that is 86 to 88 degrees Fahrenheit. More than enough for tropical system development. That is something you're going to want to pay attention to. The Gulf waters are going to be absolutely piping hot when the system emerges off the frontal boundary, and if things start to ramp up, if things start to get their act together, if we're not seeing as much wind shear and the dry air is not as much of a hazard, then you're going to have a situation where things could potentially escalate real quickly, especially as we look at the ocean heat content as well. Here is your ocean heat content. OHC continues to be a pretty interesting situation right here, where the loop current is, where this cold front is expected to detach with that tropical system, is either at or just north of that loop current right here, where you're looking at your OHC values exceeding 125. That is more than conducive for pretty quick organization, development, and dare I say, strengthening. Now, that is with a caveat: if it moves further to the north, it's going to have less ocean heat content to work with, but the trade-off with that will be much warmer water temperatures. It takes a lot less energy to warm up shallow water compared to deep water, but still, you're looking at 30 degrees compared to maybe 32 degrees, which is almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who do not use the metric system as it's approaching the coast. So it's definitely kind of a pick your poison type of situation. You have the very warm waters of the Gulf, you have plenty of ocean heat content to deal with, especially if the system moves into the loop current and then swings further up to the north. Now you have your two other wild cards that you're going to want to look at, and that is your wind shear and your dry air. Let's go ahead and take a look at both of them. Let's go ahead and pull up our trusty dusty European, generally the most accurate in terms of conditions right here. Let's go ahead and look at our wind shear map for the Euro right here. Here is what we got for right now. If this system were to emerge today, I would tell you that it would most likely be moving in a rather hostile environment in the Gulf, but that is today and not 5 days from now. So what's it looking like 5 days from now? Well, 24 hours out, that shear does start to lift a little bit, and you do start to notice that shear get slowly better and better and better until we get to 5 days out, where a lot of this region, especially in the northeastern quadrant of the Gulf, with the exception of a few isolated areas, relatively low shear populates this area. That is your first sign that, hey, maybe the AI models are onto something right here, and it's going to be beneficial that this cold front is going to move through and detach. And with that, a lot of the shear is going to be gone. And by the time we get to 6 days out, when the system starts to get its act together off the coast of Florida and potentially in the loop current, you have maybe some mesoscale shear to deal with further up to the north that might hinder it early on. But a lot of the bulky shear is going to stay further to the west and further to the south, and that's not going to hinder tropical development very much, in my opinion. So just the main things we're going to have to watch, though, is this mesoscale shear. Is this going to persist, or is this going to collapse and die? And from what I've seen right here, it kind of collapses with the exception of this bulky part right here that starts to emerge. That might be an interesting situation to pay attention to, but that also might not be shear. Sometimes with these models, they can confuse the winds of an actual tropical cyclone that is developing with wind shear, and sometimes the quote-unquote shear is part of the system. So I figured I'd emphasize that for you guys real quickly, and I figured I'd just let you guys know, because it's going to be very critical for what's going to be happening in the next few days on this model. As time continues to progress, we get to 7 days out. Things start to get a little interesting. You do have this little blob of shear over here that you're going to want to watch out for, whether it is synoptic or mesoscale. It does start to detach a little bit off the coast of Florida over here as well, but by and large, you're looking at least from a spotty point, a relatively low sheared environment until we start to get to about 10 days out when that shear starts to repopulate parts of the Gulf right here. And by the time we get to 11 days out, anything that tries to develop by the time we get to July 23rd is going to get sheared all the way to heck over here. So I wouldn't necessarily be too concerned with it, but it does have a really long window for tropical development. If it kind of hovers in the Gulf and stays over there until around June 22nd, it might actually have a good shot at development, especially as we look at the dry air aspect of things. Here is our dry air. Look at this. What dry air are we dealing with? We have a lot of moisture in the Gulf right now, primarily due to the fact that there's been a lot more mesoscale convection that's been produced across much of the Gulf region, and it's been mixing a lot of the dry air out. And when that frontal boundary moves through, it's also going to bring more convection. So it's already going to have a pretty decent starter package as time continues to progress. As we go ahead and go to 48 hours out, you have a pretty significant moisture pocket already starting to move from much of the deep south into much of the Gulf region over here. This northern part of the Gulf is really starting to get moist by the time we start to get to around July 14th, July 15th. And then as time continues to go on, you do see a little bit more dry air populating this region right here. But by the time we get to the 17th of July, you have this moisture pocket starting to slowly emerge into parts of the Gulf right here. You start seeing more convection starting to pop up over here as that frontal boundary moves through and this system starts to detach. You're going to have a pretty good moisture pocket, and by the time we get to July 18th, it's going to be reinforced pretty well, in my opinion. Yes, you're going to have some dry air across part of these regions, but this is what I like to call mixable dry air. For those of you who do not know what mixable dry air is, mixable dry air is basically dry air where if you produce enough convection, eventually the convection can win out and easily mix out that dry air. So that's kind of the main aspect of things for right there. Then as time continues to go on, that moisture pocket continues to persist and just carries and carries and carries as we get to the 20th and the 21st before you have another front move through and potentially bring more dry air after that as well, potentially killing off any chances of development by the time we get to the evening of July 22nd. But regardless, you see this situation right here. You're looking at this, you're looking at the models, looking at better and better and better conditions, better moisture, better shear probabilities, much warmer waters as well. It's definitely something that you're going to want to pay attention to, and it's definitely something we're going to continue to keep an eye on here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. In terms of the intensity that I'm seeing with this, it's too early to determine. It's too early to determine because we don't really know what exactly is going to happen. The NHC hasn't designated this an area of interest at the time of me recording this video. I don't know exactly what the ceiling is going to be. I know the AI runs are going crazy with it. This is kind of a wait and see type of situation. And in my opinion, the next 48 hours are going to be the most critical 48 hours of this situation. You're going to have your conditions set. You're going to have more dry air start to get mixed out. You're going to have more moisture moving in, and you're going to have to see what that wind shear is going to do and how that is going to respond. So those are all the three things that we're going to need to deal with. I hope this dissects it pretty well, and I hope the main takeaway from this is there is a pretty good window for tropical development, and conditions are actually pretty favorable for it as long as it's done before July 22nd / July 23rd. You have your window from July 17th to the 22nd. That's about a 5 to 6 day window right there that you have of organization development with little shear and limited dry air, with the exception of that mixable stuff I was talking about earlier. So that's what we're looking at in the Gulf. There's also another area that I do briefly want to touch on as well as we start to wind down. Let's go ahead and move out of the North Atlantic, and let's go ahead and pull up the European ensembles right here. I just want to touch upon this real quickly because I know people have been talking about it, and I figured I might as well bring this up right here. You're noticing more ensembles starting to pop up over here in the main development region, especially south of the Cabo Verde Islands. It's definitely an interesting situation. It's been a signal that the European ensembles have showed over there for the last couple of days. but just for my curiosity, what's the GFS ensemble showing? It's showing kind of a weaker scenario in terms of it, not as much of support with this overall. And part of the reason for that is because this main development region, even though the shear is going to be lifting, it's going to be battling a lot of Sahara dust, and it's going to be moving through much of the deep tropics even as we get into late July and starting into early August. The ensembles are definitely a bit more aggressive compared to the operational. They're not really showing too much with this, primarily due to that dry air aspect of it as well. In my opinion, based on what I'm seeing right here, yes, you have the FNV3 moving through as well. You do have a couple of ensembles with the FNV3, which are Google DeepMind, but to me, this seems to be more so noise than anything. If we do see any tropical development in that region, it's going to be relatively brief, and I wouldn't necessarily expect too much out of it, at least until we get into like August, September, when that Sahara dust starts to calm down. But overall, that's what we're looking at right here, and I wanted to briefly address this as well as show the conditions for it too, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about. So here's what we have. This is by the time we get to 10 days out. Let's go ahead and move back to about 5 days and work from there. You do have a moisture pocket emerging over here off the coast of Africa, but it's mainly surrounded by a ton of dry air. And it's not necessarily the mixable type, it's more so the Sahara dust, and it's more so going to be a blanket of it. So overall, if it does develop, it's going to have to do it before it gets to the Cabo Verde Islands, before any sort of development, because yes, the shear might be good with this, but you're going to be blanketed with a lot of dry air in the main development region. So that's going to be something that we're going to want to keep an eye on. For me, it seems to be more so noise than anything. And it's definitely something that we will continue to watch, especially as our Gulf system starts to potentially get its act together, and we'll continue to keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Be sure to like, subscribe if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. Feel free to join the Storms United Discord server as well. But with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.